The clouds hung low over Delhi that evening, their edges heavy with rain that had been threatening to fall all day. The air carried a strange stillness, the kind that makes you feel something important is about to happen. Narendra Modi stood near the window of his residence, watching the first drops splash against the glass. His mind was not on politics, not on speeches, not on the thousand things demanding his attention. Instead, his thoughts were drifting to a simple conversation he had with his mother Hiraba, just 2 days before. He remembered her voice, soft yet firm, as she sat on the wooden chair in their old family courtyard. "Beta, you must always find time to listen to people who bring light," she had said. "A leader is not only one who speaks, but one who learns from others. Even the rain listens before it falls." Narendra had smiled at her words then, but the meaning stayed with him. It was the rain now, and that memory, that made him reach for his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and stopped at one named Sundar Pichai, the CEO of one of the world's largest technology companies, a man who had built his journey from a modest background in India to the highest corridors of Silicon Valley. Narendra knew they had met before, at official events, in formal rooms, but he had never simply walked and talked with him as two people sharing ideas, away from microphones and cameras. The first ring felt long, the second even longer, before Sundar's calm voice came through. "Namaste Modi ji," Sundar said warmly. "This is a surprise." "Namaste, Sundar," Narendra replied, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Are you in Delhi at the moment?" There was a pause, then Sundar's answer. "Yes, I'm here for 2 days. Why do you ask?" Narendra glanced at the rain now falling harder outside. "I have an unusual request. How about a walk in the rain this evening? No protocol, no press, just you and me. My mother reminded me that real conversations happen when people forget the world is watching." There was a soft chuckle from Sundar. "And a walk in the rain with the Prime Minister. I have to say, that's a first. But I'd be honored." By the time Sundar arrived at the residence, the rain had grown steady, the streets glistening under dim streetlights. Both men stepped out without umbrellas, letting the cool drops soak their shoulders. They began walking along the quiet lane that curved past the gardens, their shoes splashing lightly in puddles. For a few minutes, neither spoke. They simply listened to the rain, to the soft rustle of leaves, to the far-off sound of a lone cycle bell. Then, Narendra broke the silence. "Tell me, Sundar, when you first left India, did you ever imagine you would lead a company that shapes the way billions live their daily lives?" Sundar's eyes flickered with a thoughtful light. "When I first left Modi ji, I carried only dreams and a small bag. The world outside seemed too big, and I, too small. But my father once told me opportunity is like rain. If you keep your hands open, it will find you." I think I kept my hands open. Narendra nodded, feeling the words settle deep. "And now," he asked, "what do you see ahead?" Sundar hesitated before answering. "I see a world racing forward with technology, but I also see hearts falling behind. People are connected through screens, but lonely in real life. I think our next big challenge is not just innovation, it's keeping humanity alive in the middle of it." A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. As if agreeing with him, Narendra slowed his pace. "My mother said something similar," he admitted. "She said that no matter how high you rise, you must remember to walk at the pace of those who have less. Otherwise, one day you will find yourself walking alone." The rain seemed to grow gentler for a moment, as if listening. Sundar smiled faintly. "She sounds like a wise woman." Narendra's eyes softened. "She is, and she told me to listen more, which is why we are here." They walked on, their conversation deepening. Sundar spoke of his struggles adjusting to a new country, of nights when he wondered if he should return home. Narendra shared moments of doubt from his early political life, when winning seemed impossible and the road ahead uncertain. They spoke not as Prime Minister and CEO, but as two men who had once been boys with simple dreams. By the time they reached the old banyan tree near the edge of the lane, the rain had eased into a fine mist. Sundar looked at Narendra and said, quietly, "You know, Modi ji, people will wonder why you chose to invite me for a walk like this. They will expect headlines and announcements." Narendra's lips curved into a small smile. "Let them wonder. Sometimes the most important things in life happen without a stage. This is one of them." The night air was cool now, the rain fading into silence. But in that silence, something had been planted in understanding, a bridge between two worlds, that might, in time, bring unexpected change. As they turned back, toward the residence, Sundar said, "I think your mother was right. Real conversations happen when no one else is watching." Narendra glanced at him, his eyes calm yet bright. "Yes, and tonight, the rain was our witness." The rain had stopped, but drops still clung to the leaves, sliding down slowly and falling to the ground with soft taps. The street smelled of wet earth, that deep scent that always seemed to bring back old memories. Narendra, Modi, and Sundar Pichai walked side by side, their clothes damp, yet neither seemed to notice. They had reached that point in a conversation where the words were less about answers and more about finding the right questions. Sundar glanced at the old banyan tree they had just passed. "When I was young," he said, "I used to think big change always came from big actions, huge speeches, huge investments, big leaps. But over time, I learned that sometimes it begins with something very small, like a single walk." Narendra looked at him carefully. "And do you think this walk can lead to something?" "I think it already has," Sundar replied. "You just haven't said it out loud yet." Narendra stopped for a moment, looking down the narrow lane. "What if," he began slowly, "what if we created something that made people meet each other again, not on screens, not through apps, but face to face? Something that brought together the wisdom of the old and the creativity of the young." Sundar's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You mean, a program, an initiative?" "More than that," Narendra said, his voice firm. "A bridge. Technology is like rain, it can fall anywhere, but we must guide it to where it's needed most. Right now, I see villages where children dream but have no tools, and cities where tools exist but dreams are fading. What if we could connect them?" Soon, mind raced. "We could create learning hubs, small, simple spaces in rural areas equipped with high-speed internet, open to everyone, where local mentors guide the youth. And at the same time, city innovators could visit these hubs, share skills, and learn from the communities." Narendra's eyes lit up. "Yes, but it must be more than just teaching technology. It must teach values, respect, humility, kindness. We have to make sure that in chasing progress, we don't lose our humanity." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of temple bells from far away. Sundar looked thoughtful. "There's one challenge," he said. "People are used to fast results. This kind of change will take years, maybe decades." Narendra began walking again, slowly. "When my mother planted a mango tree, she didn't eat its fruit in her lifetime. But she planted it anyway, because someone would need its shade. We have to think like that." There was a silence between them, but it was a good silence, the kind that meant both men were picturing the same future. Then, without warning, a small figure darted out from a side alley and ran straight toward them. It was a boy, no more than 12, barefoot, clutching something tightly in his hands. His clothes were soaked, his face pale, but his eyes burned with urgency. He stopped in front of them, breathing hard. "Sir, you are Narendra Modi, right?" he asked, looking up. Narendra bent slightly so he was at eye level with the boy. "Yes, bait. What happened?" The boy opened his hand to reveal a small, broken tablet. "This is for my sister. She studies in school, but the teacher says she can't join the online class because our tablet stopped working. Someone told me you are walking here. I thought maybe you can help. Sundar stepped forward, taking the device gently. Where do you live? The boy pointed toward a cluster of dimly lit houses at the far end of the lane. Over there. It's just me, my sister, and my mother. Narendra looked at Sundar, and Sundar looked back. The conversation they had been having suddenly felt less like an idea and more like an urgent mission. Narendra smiled softly at the boy. Don't worry, your sister will join her class again. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and, maybe, she will help us start something bigger than this. As the boy led them toward his home, the rain began again, light and steady. Sundar whispered to Narendra, "This is your mango tree moment, isn't it?" Narendra nodded, his gaze fixed ahead. Yes. And tonight, we plant the first seed. The boy led them quickly down the narrow lane, his bare feet splashing through shallow puddles. The air smelled of damp clay and smoke from small cooking fires. Narendra, Modi, and Sundar Pichai followed close behind, their steps careful on the uneven path. Every few seconds, the boy glanced back as if making sure they were still with him. They reached a small one-room house with a tin roof patched in several places. Rainwater dripped from the edges into rusty buckets placed outside. The boy pushed open the wooden door, and a dim light flickered from inside. His sister, about 10 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor, a worn school notebook open in front of her. She looked up in surprise, her dark eyes wide when she saw the two men step in. In the corner, their mother was stirring something in a small pot over a single gas flame. She froze when she recognized Narendra. Prodin Mantri Ji, she whispered, almost dropping the spoon. Narendra smiled gently and stepped forward. Please, no formalities. We just came to see you. The mother's eyes moved to Sundar, then to the broken tablet in his hands. We saved for months to buy that. It was the only way my daughter could attend her online classes. Last week, it stopped working. And since then, she sits here, reading from old books. Sundar knelt down next to the girl. What's your name? Mira, she said softly. Mira, Sundar continued. What do you want to be when you grow up? The girl hesitated, then answered, a teacher. I want to teach girls in my village so they don't stop studying. Narendra and Sundar exchanged a quick glance. This was exactly the kind of dream they had spoken about only minutes earlier. Nara sat on the edge of the small cot, leaning forward. Mira, if you had a working tablet again, would you use it only for your own studies? Or would you also share it with other children who need it? Mira straightened her back, her voice suddenly steady. I would share, because when I teach others, I also learn more. The rain outside grew louder, pattering on the roof. Sundar opened his phone and sent a quick message. By tomorrow, you will have a new device, he said. And not just you, other children here will too. The mother's eyes welled up. Why? Why would you help us like this? Narendra's answer was simple. Because if we don't start here, where else will we start? They stepped outside again after a while, but the mood was different now. The boy ran ahead, laughing in relief. Mira stood at the door, holding her old notebook close to her chest. As they walked back toward the main road, Sundar spoke quietly. You see, Modi ji, this is the story in every corner of the country. Broken tools, broken chances. We fix one, but there are thousands more. Narendra nodded. Then we fix them one by one, and we teach others to fix them too. But just as they were about to reach the banyan tree again, Sundar's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed. This is from my team in California, he said. It's urgent. He stepped aside to answer, and Narendra watched him closely. Sundar's tone was calm, but serious. When he returned, there was a shadow in his eyes. There's a problem, Sundar said quietly. If we move forward with our plan, there are Companies that won't like it. They may try to stop us. The rain began to fall harder again, as if marking the moment. Narendra's jaw tightened. Then we'll need more than a plan. We'll need courage. The next morning, the sky over Delhi was still heavy with clouds, as if the rain had not finished its work. Narendra Modi sat at his desk, going through papers, but his mind kept drifting back to Mira's determined eyes. He knew that what they had started the night before could grow into something much larger. But Sundar's warning echoed in his mind. There were those who would not want this change. Sundar arrived at the residence just before noon, his phone in his hand, his face thoughtful. I spoke to my team last night, he began. They love the vision, but some of our partners are worried. If we create free learning hubs with open internet, it could cut into their business models. They might try to slow it down. Narendra leaned back in his chair. Why would anyone fight something that helps children? Because, Sundar said quietly, helping people for free doesn't always make money. And there are those who only see numbers, not faces. Narendra's eyes narrowed. Then we make them see the faces. Before they could speak further, an aide stepped into the room. Sir, there are reporters outside asking about your walk in the rain last night. They've heard you visited a small home in the lane. Narendra exchanged a look with Sundar. Let them ask, he said. But we will not give them headlines. The real work will happen away from cameras. Later that day, they visited a small government school on the edge of the city. The building was old, the walls faded, but the children inside greeted them with bright smiles. Narendra and Sundar walked from class to class, talking to teachers, asking what they needed most. The answers were always the same: better access to technology, better training, and more ways to keep children engaged. As they left, Sundar's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of his senior executives overseas. We've received formal notices from 2 partner companies. They are concerned your India project could disrupt the market. They are asking us to step back. Sundar showed the message to Narendra. This is the start, he said. They will try to pressure us quietly at first. If we keep going, it will become louder. Narendra looked out at the schoolyard, where a group of children were playing in the rain, their laughter carrying across the air. Then we will be louder than them, he replied. That evening, they sat together in a quiet room, sketching ideas on a large sheet of paper. They mapped out the hubs, the training programs, the ways to fund them without depending on companies that might try to block their work. The plan grew slowly, each step carefully placed. But just as they began to feel the weight of possibility, a new problem arrived. Sundar's local security advisor walked in with a file. There's something you should see, he said, placing it on the table. Inside were reports of certain groups spreading rumors online that the project was a political move. Not a genuine effort. Not a genuine effort. Narendra read the pages slowly. They're trying to turn people against us before we even begin. Sundar closed the file. Then we need a story stronger than their rumors. Something that will make people believe in this before it's even built. Narendra's eyes lit up. Then let's start with Mira. She will be the first story the country hears. 2 days later, Mira sat nervously on a wooden chair in her small courtyard, her hands gripping the sides. A camera crew from the local community channel had set up in front of her, adjusting the microphone and checking the light. Sundar knelt beside her. Just speak from your heart, he said gently. Tell them exactly what you told me and Modi ji. Narendra stood at the gate, watching as Mira took a deep breath. The rain had stopped, and the soft gray sky made the air feel calm. The camera light switched on. My name is Mira, she began in a small voice that grew stronger with each word. I want to be a teacher. Last week my tablet broke, and I thought I would never join my classes again, but then 2 people came to my home and said they would help. I want to learn, but I also want to help other children learn. We share books here. Now we will share the internet too. When the interview ended, the crew packed up and left. Sundar uploaded the short clip to his social media account. Within hours, it began spreading far beyond the village. Comments poured in, some offering help, others sharing their own stories. By the next morning, several schools from nearby towns had reached out, asking if they could be part of the first learning hubs. Narendra and Sundar met at the residence again. Maps spread out before them. "It's working," Sundar said, tapping a point on the map. "We have volunteers ready to travel to rural areas, and local teachers willing to train." But their moment of hope was interrupted by a phone call to Narendra's office. It was from a well-known business leader, one whose company sold digital learning packages at high prices. The voice on the line was polite, but firm. "Prime Minister, we've heard of this initiative. If you give free access to technology and training, you will destroy our market. I'm asking you to stop before it goes too far." Narendra's reply was calm. "This is not about markets. This is about futures." The call ended coldly. Sundar looked at him. "They won't just stop at calls. They have influence. They can push policy, media, even public opinion against us." Narendra folded the map. "Then we prepare for that storm too." Later that day, they visited Mira's school. When she walked in with her new tablet, the other children gathered around her, their faces full of excitement. Sundar set up a simple wireless hotspot in the classroom, showing the teachers how to use it. For the first time, the children saw live images from classrooms in another state. Their laughter and shouts filled the room. As Narendra watched, he felt a deep certainty. "This is why we can't stop," he murmured. But just as the lesson ended, a black car pulled up outside the school. Two men in suits stepped out, their expressions unreadable. One handed Sundar a folded letter. "Consider this a final warning," the man said before walking back to the car. Sundar opened it. It was a legal notice, stating that their project violated digital service agreements with several corporations. The deadline to stop was written in bold: 7 days. The children inside were still laughing and exploring the tablet. Unaware of the shadow now hanging over the project, Naren looked at Sundar, his voice steady but low. 7 days is enough. We will not shut this down, we will make it unstoppable before they can touch it." The moment Sundar folded the letter, the air in the small classroom felt heavier. Outside, the black car had already disappeared into the distance, leaving only the sound of the children's laughter. Narendra Modi stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the road. 7 days, he said quietly. "That's all we have. Then they will try to shut every door we open." Sundar slipped the letter into his bag. "Then we open so many doors in 7 days that they can never close them." All. They began that very evening. The first step was telling the story not through official speeches, but through people themselves. Sundar reached out to his contacts in tech communities, asking them to share Mira's video. Narendra called trusted friends across different states, urging them to find local heroes like Mira, children and teachers whose dreams had been blocked by broken tools or closed opportunities. By the second day, dozens of similar stories began to appear online: videos of small classrooms, children studying under trees, young volunteers teaching elders how to use smartphones. Every post carried the same message: learning belongs to everyone. On the third day, they traveled to another village, where a young boy named Arjun had been fixing discarded computers in his spare time. They set up a small hub there with parts he had collected for years. The moment it came online, the entire village gathered to watch an agricultural training video streamed in their own language. On the fourth day, the legal pressure increased. The corporations behind the notice began releasing statements, calling the project unsustainable and harmful to private enterprise. Some news channels echoed their words, but others started showing the faces of children like Mira and Arjun. On the fifth day, volunteers from cities began traveling to rural hubs, carrying laptops, routers, and projectors in bags. Many were strangers to each other, yet they worked side by side. One group of college students traveled overnight by train just to set up a hotspot in a hill village. On the 6th day, a live stream was organized connecting 10 hubs across the country. Mira spoke again, this time to hundreds of children at once. "We are learning together," she said with a shy smile. "And when we grow up, we will teach others." On the 7th day, the deadline arrived. Instead of holding a meeting in a closed room, Narendra and Sundar invited the press to one of the hubs. It was raining lightly, just as it had on the night of their first walk. Children sat in rows, some holding tablets, others using shared computers. Teachers stood at the back, watching with quiet pride. A reporter asked, "Prime Minister, the companies say you are breaking agreements. Will you stop?" Narendra looked around at the children before answering. "You cannot break what does not belong to a company. Learning belongs to the people. And as long as they are willing to share it, no paper, no agreement, no wall can stop it." Sundar added, 7 days ago, this was an idea. Today, it is a network of over 100 hubs. If someone tries to close one, 10 more will open. This is no longer ours, it belongs to them. The legal threats never disappeared, but they became small against the growing wave of public support. People donated devices, offered training, and told stories that kept the movement alive. Weeks later, Narendra visited Mira's school again. The old tin roof still leaked when it rained, but inside, the children were connected to a world far beyond the lane. Mira ran up to him with a notebook full of her own lesson plans. "I've started teaching the younger ones," she said proudly. As Narendra stepped back outside, the rain began again, cool and steady. Sundar joined him under the banyan tree. "Your mother was right," Sundar said quietly. "Real conversations do start in the rain." Narendra smiled, looking toward the lane where it had all begun. "Yes," he said. "And sometimes, they don't just change to people, they change the future." Months passed since that first walk in the rain. What began as a small promise to a boy with a broken tablet had grown into a living network across the country. The learning hubs were no longer just places with devices and internet. They had become spaces where people gathered to share ideas, stories, and skills. But change always brought challenges. One evening, Narendra received a call from a district where the hub had been closed by local officials under regulatory review. Sundar, who was visiting another hub at the time, heard the same news through his team. Both men knew what this meant. Opponents had not given up the next morning. Instead of sending letters or holding press conferences, Narendra and Sundar went directly to that district. When they reached the hub, they found a group of children sitting outside the locked door, holding their books and notebooks in their laps. Mira was among them. She had traveled from her village to speak on behalf of the hub. When she saw Narendra and Sundar arrive, she stood up. "Sir," she said, "we can't go inside, but we can still learn outside. No one can close our minds." Her words spread quickly. The people from nearby villages came, bringing chairs, stools, and mats. Within hours, the closed hub had turned into an open-air classroom under a large neem tree. Someone set up a mobile hotspot, and the lessons continued. The local officials, seeing the crowd and the media gathering, hesitated. By evening, the hub was reopened, not because of orders from above, but because the people refused to let it die. That night, Sundar and Narendra sat under the banyan tree, where it had all started. Rain began to fall again, slow at first, then steady. "It's strange," Sundar said, "how every time the rain comes, something changes." Narendra nodded, looking at the drops falling into the puddles. "Rain doesn't ask permission to fall. It just finds the ground where it's needed. Our work should be like that." In the months that followed, the movement became self-sustaining. Volunteers trained new leaders, hubs expanded into libraries and skill centers, and children who once had no access to technology began teaching others. Mera, still young, became one of the most active trainers in the network. She traveled to places she had never seen before, carrying not just a tablet, but the belief that learning could spread like rain, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. One afternoon, years later, she found herself standing in front of a packed room at a global education summit. When it was her turn to speak, she smiled and said, "I am here because one rainy night, two people walked into my life. They brought more than a tablet, they brought a door to the world. And now, I try to open doors for others." In the audience, Narendra and Sundar sat quietly, listening. They didn't need applause. They didn't need credit. They had seen the seed grow into a forest, and that was enough. As they stepped outside the hall, it began to rain again. "Some things never change," Sundar said. "Yes," Narendra replied, watching people hurry under umbrellas while the two of them walked slowly, letting the rain fall freely on their shoulders. "But if you plant the right seeds, some changes last forever." And in that quiet, with the rain as their witness once more, they knew the future was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of those who had learned to carry it forward.